What if I told you that behind the Sunday smiles, the gospel tours, and those faith-filled Instagram posts was a dark, twisted truth even Lifetime couldn't script? Because Tamela Mann, America's gospel sweetheart, isn't just battling illness. She's been battling exploitation. And the people behind it? Allegedly, her own husband, David Mann. And it gets even uglier. Her own children are calling him out. That's right. In a plot twist straight out of a Tyler Perry drama, David Mann Jr. and his sister have officially exposed their father, accusing him of turning their mother into nothing more than a gospel machine, overworked, ignored, and possibly even silenced for the sake of fame and fortune. Let that sink in. Was Tamela really singing for the Lord or suffering for the brand? The world saw a powerhouse couple, but their kids? They saw something way darker. Forced performances, strange supplements, private collapses, and now Tamela's lying in a coma while her husband continues with business as usual, offering no real answers. This isn't just a gospel scandal. This is spiritual sabotage. And it's time the masks come off. Welcome to the expose David Mann never wanted you to hear. For decades, Tamela Mann was the gospel queen who never missed a note. Her voice could lift souls, break chains, and silence an entire room in seconds. And standing beside her through it all, her husband, David Mann, the devoted partner, the comedic relief, the ride-or-die man of faith. At least, that's what we all thought. But now, the curtains have been pulled back, and what's behind them is not holy, not loving, not even forgivable. David Mann Jr., Tamela's son, has stepped forward with claims so disturbing they've shocked the entire gospel community. And he's not alone. Tamela's daughter, once quietly loyal to the Mann brand, is now standing beside her brother, both accusing their father of one thing, turning Tamela into a gospel machine. And that machine? It's broken. See, to the world, the Manns were gospel royalty, the perfect Christian family. Church tours, reality shows, cookbooks, clean comedy. But to the people inside that family, something darker was growing. And it was growing quietly, behind every smile, every photo op, every blessed and highly favored caption. According to David Jr., Tamela hadn't been well for years. Long before she slipped into a coma, she was already deteriorating, physically, emotionally, spiritually. And every time she tried to rest, to slow down, to listen to her body, it was David Sr. who told her no. He said the people needed her. David Jr. whispered in a now viral live stream. He said the Lord would give her strength. But it wasn't the Lord pushing her. It was him. Think about that. While we were buying concert tickets and praising their marriage online, Tamela was backstage, clutching her chest, whispering, "I don't feel right," and being forced to push through anyway. One incident in particular shattered David Jr.'s silence. A show in Atlanta. Tamela collapsed in her dressing room, shaking, breathless, nearly unconscious. The team panicked. But instead of canceling the show or calling for help immediately, David Sr. allegedly told them to say it was low blood sugar and carry on like nothing happened. She sang while dying, David Jr. said through tears. She gave everything to that crowd while her body was shutting down. But here's where the story takes a turn, from tragic to terrifying. Because David Jr. doesn't just believe his father pushed Tamela too hard. He suspects she was poisoned. You heard that right. According to blood work reviewed by private doctors, Tamela had toxic substances in her system, chemicals that don't come from food or medicine, supplements she never approved, vitamin shots administered by shady nurses, hired by people tied to David Sr., and now she's in a coma. And the people who loved her most? They're convinced this wasn't fate. This wasn't just exhaustion. This was a setup. David Jr. described it like this. Every time she got sicker, my father got more control, more signatures, more power over her finances, her estate, her decisions. And it wasn't just him noticing. Portia, Tamela's daughter, began noticing strange medications in the kitchen cabinet. Bottles with no labels. Meals being changed. Doctor's orders, her father said. But no doctor's name was ever given. Then came the nurse. An anonymous tip came from a woman claiming to be a private nurse, one who had been giving Tamela immune boosters once a week. Boosters she later admitted were never cleared by any licensed physician. And after Tamela collapsed in private, away from the cameras, that same nurse disappeared. But David Sr.? He showed up with a press release. He called it a temporary health setback. He said Tamela was resting in the Lord's presence. He even used her condition to promote a new devotional book. And that's when David Jr. snapped. He went live on Instagram. Not for attention, not for revenge, but because his mother was now silent and someone had to speak for her.
She loved hard, he said.
She gave until there was nothing left. And when she needed love the most, she got used instead. Tamela's journal entries backed it all up. Portia and David Jr. began reading pages from her private notebook, and what they found broke them completely. "I'm tired, Lord. My heart feels heavy. David says it's just stress, but I know my body is failing. My vision's blurry. David says I just need sleep." Still, he booked 3 more dates. Let that sit with you. A woman known for her strength, her peace, her faith, begging for rest. And the one person who should have protected her, allegedly feeding her vitamins that made it worse. Tamela's collapse wasn't sudden. It was the result of months, maybe years, of being pushed beyond human limits. And when she finally passed out, unable to go on, David Sr. didn't even ride in the ambulance. He stayed behind to clean up the show. David Jr. said it was like part of the script. And now, as Tamela lies in a hospital bed, unresponsive, her husband has gone silent. Not once has he stayed overnight. Not once has he answered the tough questions. He posts scriptures. He asks for prayers. But behind the scenes, according to his kids, he's lawyering up. In a family meeting, Portia reportedly screamed at him, "You called it love, but it was control. You called it purpose, but it was profit." And suddenly, the image of David Mann, the loving husband, the gospel partner, started to crack. From private nurses to hidden pills. From rest turned into performances. From God's will twisted into manipulation. The Mann legacy? It's no longer spotless. And the people pulling back the curtain? Her children. Because Tamela may not be able to speak right now. But her pain,
Her decline,
her silence, it's speaking volumes. And this is just the beginning. After David Jr.'s explosive live stream and the public unveiling of Tamela's private journal, the gospel world found itself in a state of confusion, disbelief, and outrage. Was this the same David Mann we had all admired? The comedic, loyal husband always smiling beside Tamela on stage? Or had that been just a performance, one that ran for decades, at the cost of a woman's life? David Jr. isn't backing down. Neither is Portia. She's begun her own quiet investigation into her mother's decline. She's reaching out to past staff, former nurses, assistants, tour managers, people who saw Tamela behind the curtain. And what she's uncovering is damning tired, like bone-deep tired. Sometimes she'd nod off mid-conversation. We thought maybe it was age or stress. But now it makes sense. Her meds kept changing. There were new bottles every month. Another backup singer claimed Tamela once vomited moments before going on stage, and David Sr. still forced the performance to happen. He said, "Just do 2 songs, then I'll carry the rest of the show." She barely made it through one. But even more disturbing was the testimony of a private caretaker hired briefly in late 2023. She described Tamela as disoriented, forgetful, and deeply anxious. She was scared of taking her supplements. I remember her whispering to herself, "These don't feel right." But when I asked if she wanted to stop, she said, "David says I have to." Portia went straight to the family's legal team. She wanted answers, records, names of doctors, any receipts for the treatments her mother had been given. But suddenly, doors were locked. Accounts were frozen.
even family passwords were changed.
And that's when it clicked. David Sr. wasn't just keeping control. He was tightening the walls around Tamela, making sure no one could ask him too many questions. He isolated her. Portia said in a private voice memo that later leaked online. Little by little, she stopped talking to us. Not because she didn't love us, but because she was too tired. And he made sure we blamed her for it. But here's where the story goes from heartbreaking to downright sinister. One evening, David Jr. received a package at his doorstep. No name, no return address. Inside was a USB stick, and on it, video clips. Clips of Tamela in dressing rooms, sitting slumped in chairs, her eyes glazed. A makeup artist asking, "Do you want to lie down?" And her whispering, "I can't. David says they're waiting." Clips of David Siester behind the scenes, coaching the crew. "If she says she's tired, give her water and keep her moving. We've got people flying in." And worst of all, a clip where Tamela, barely audible, says, "My head hurts. I can't feel my fingers." Something was wrong, but no one helped her. David Jr. shared some of this footage with a trusted journalist who immediately launched an independent investigation. And that led to something explosive, the discovery of forged medical clearances.
You read that right.
Several of Tamela's performance contracts included notes from Dr. Kelvin Mathis, a physician supposedly clearing her to perform. But when the journalist reached out to the Texas Medical Board, no such doctor existed. Someone had forged her health approvals. Now, the question wasn't just, was David Siester pushing her too hard? It became, was David Siester falsifying her medical condition to keep the money flowing? Portia and David Jr. filed for emergency guardianship rights, attempting to block David Siester from accessing Tamela's estate, touring income, or health decisions. The judge issued a temporary freeze on all assets related to the Mann family brand. When confronted outside his Dallas home by reporters, David Siester refused to comment. He wore sunglasses. He clutched a Bible. And when one journalist asked, "Do you deny poisoning your wife?" he simply walked away. The silence said more than words ever could. Meanwhile, Tamela remained in a medically induced coma, but her room was no longer empty. Now, her kids were there every day, reading from her journal, playing her favorite worship songs, telling her, "The truth is coming to light." "We will not let them cover this up," David Jr. posted. "If you've ever loved my mother, help us. Help us get answers." The gospel community began to respond. Several pastors, including some who had shared stages with the Manns, issued statements of concern. Others pulled out of upcoming events involving David Siester. And fans? They were livid. Tamela's Instagram was flooded with comments. "We love you, Queen. We see the truth now." Sending prayers not just for healing, but for justice. "Expose him. We believe your kids." But David Siester wasn't done yet. 1 week after the live stream, he announced a new online devotional series titled, "Through the Fire: How God Refines Us in Trials."
Yes.
While his wife lay in a coma, while his children publicly accused him of manipulation, lies, and possible poisoning, he launched a monetized, faith-based series asking for donations. The backlash was immediate. David Jr. posted again, "You're using my mother's suffering as marketing. You haven't sat by her bed once. You haven't answered Toth forged medical papers. And you still want people to see you as the victim?" And then came the breaking point. Portia, usually the quiet one, called an emergency press conference. Surrounded by close friends and gospel artists who once toured with her parents, she held up a clear Ziploc bag. Inside it, bottles of pills. "These were in our mother's home," she said, voice shaking. "We had them independently tested. These are not vitamins. They contain trace levels of a sedative not approved for commercial sale in the U.S." The press gasped. Portia's next words were simple.
Chilling.
"Our mother was being drugged, and the only person administering these was our father." What happened next? The room exploded. Reporters shouting questions. Lawyers being contacted. The Texas Department of Health launched an immediate inquiry into Tamela Mann's care and treatment. And David Siester? Still silent. Still hiding behind scripture. Still refusing to step foot into the hospital room where his wife, the woman who built the empire with him, lay unresponsive. But the children? They weren't backing down. Tamela's legacy, once built on praise, was now drenched in controversy. But the real tragedy? She never asked for any of this. She just wanted to sing, to serve, to inspire. Instead, her body was broken under the weight of a system built to keep her going, even if it killed her. And now, the truth can't be stopped. After Portia's bombshell press conference, the entire image of the Mann family as gospel royalty shattered like stained glass under a sledgehammer. The story wasn't just a private family crisis anymore. It had become a national scandal. News outlets picked it up. Gospel blogs exploded. Hashtags like #Justice for Tamela and #TamelaTruth trended worldwide. And still, David Siester stayed silent. But silence wasn't enough to keep the walls from closing in. Within 48 hours of Portia publicly revealing the pills allegedly administered to Tamela without proper clearance, the Texas Medical Board and local law enforcement. Official investigations were underway. Authorities had officially opened an investigation into potential medical malpractice and criminal negligence. Suddenly, people who had protected the Mann family brand were running for cover. The private nurse who had disappeared months ago was found in a small town 3 hours outside Dallas. After initial hesitation, she confessed to administering injections without a license, claiming she was under pressure and was just doing what David Siester instructed. That was the break investigators needed. Tamela's medical records were re-examined, and several signatures on her approved for travel health documents didn't match the handwriting of any verified doctor. In short, forged, sloppy, and criminal. Meanwhile, David Jr. and Portia doubled down on their mission. They hired a full-time legal team, launched an independent toxicology study, and, perhaps most shockingly, petitioned for full legal guardianship over Tamela, effectively attempting to strip David Siester of any decision-making power over her health, estate, or career. It was war. And this time it was being fought in public. Churches were divided. Some pastors issued support for Tamela's children. Others defended David Siester, saying this was the devil trying to destroy a man of God. But behind the pulpits and under the choir robes, even the gospel elite began pulling away. A close family friend and fellow gospel artist went live on Facebook and said, "I stayed quiet out of respect, but I saw things that didn't sit right. Tamela was a light, a force, and she didn't deserve this. If David Siester really loved her, he should have let her rest." Meanwhile, inside the hospital, Tamela still hadn't woken up. Her condition was listed as stable, but unresponsive. But for her kids, hope refused to die. Every day, Portia sat beside her bed, reading old journal entries. Sometimes she'd sing softly, the same songs Tamela once led in sold-out arenas. David Jr. played her gospel tracks from her early career, when she was still free, still smiling, still in control. And then something happened. One evening, as Portia held her hand and whispered, "We're here now, Mama. You don't have to fight alone anymore." Tamela's fingers trembled. Doctors rushed in. Tests were run. While she hadn't regained consciousness, the brain scans showed a spike in response activity. It wasn't a miracle, but it was a sign. She was still in there, and that meant she could still be saved. But the fight wasn't over. Just days later, David Siester, backed by 2 lawyers and a PR rep, filed a motion to block the guardianship. He claimed his children were being manipulated by outside forces, and that the media had poisoned their minds. Poison? The irony wasn't lost on anyone. But in court, the real truth came forward. Tamela's toxicology report was read aloud. Trace elements of sedatives, nerve blockers, and unregulated supplements were confirmed. The court was shown the anonymous nurse's statement, the forged medical documents, the shady transactions involving Tamela's tour income being routed to a separate business account, one only David Siester had access to. The judge didn't hesitate. Temporary guardianship was granted to David Jr. and Portia. David Siester was barred from hospital visits, financial access, or any medical decision-making until the investigation concluded. Outside the courtroom, Portia wept. David Jr. hugged her tight and whispered, "We did it for her. This isn't about revenge. It's about Mom finally getting peace." Inside the hospital, a bigger moment was coming. Exactly 32 days after entering the coma, Tamela stirred. Not fully. Not miraculously, but her eyes opened. Her breathing deepened. A faint moan escaped her lips. Portia leaned in, tears falling onto Tamela's cheeks. "She's coming back," the nurse whispered. "She's really coming back." And when David Jr. held her hand and said, "We're here now, Mama. He can't hurt you anymore," Tamela squeezed